So let's just, for the sake of argument, assume that my sensation that the divide in the Star Wars community is a microcosm of the political polarization that's going on in society in general, and that a lot of the people who are having negative reactions to Lucasfilm's movies and products have less to do with the quality of the products and more to do with the fact that the people making these products have made certain political postures and have thus pre-triggered a whole segment of the audience into going into their films looking for any little thing to find wrong with it so they can justify being angry at the product itself, so they can justify a boycott or just walking away from it, so they can justify their anger. It's all a rationalization. That's my suspicion. And I'm not just saying that's true with everyone, even by saying if that's my primary suspicion. Maybe 70 to 80% of the people. And I don't think very many, if any, are terribly conscious of the fact that this is what's going on. The subconscious rules a lot of our decision-making process. Colors our world, changes our perceptions. But like I said, for the sake of argument, let's assume that's not the case. That just boils down to something fairly simple. Like, it turns out that Luke Skywalker was so iconic of a character that the way he was altered and portrayed in this movie has just created a rift between the fandom and the creative team that won't be able to be healed. This is foolish if this is your own personal case. And it's still conveniently aligns with the same people who take umbrage with any of the SJW-isms that sneak their way into Star Wars. All art is a form of propaganda created by at least the artist itself, even if they don't have a specific outright political agenda or angle. They can't help but have their own beliefs and opinions leak into whatever it is they're trying to make. I mean, look at Michael Bay's Transformers movies. Amidst all the other things wrong with them, there's also some rather subtle things that go along as you watch them in aggregate that it's very subtly anti-Obama administration. Largely the switchover. The Transformers were very buddy-buddy with the American government when the movies were being made while Bush was still in power. But as soon as Obama was in power, the Transformers suddenly became antagonistic with the government. The government was always like, we got to shut you guys down. But the military still liked the Transformers. So, anyway, that's a whole other thing. I'm just saying, as an example, these sorts of things sneak into all sorts of movies, and all sorts of people do them. People don't normally take it that seriously if they even notice it. They're there for other reasons. They know that human beings have made this thing, and that's starring human beings and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, I don't even say that we're politically polarized. We've become a politically crystallized society, just about ready to shatter. And that's spread out through a lot of various levels of what makes our culture, including pop culture. And beneath pop culture, the nerdy aspects of pop culture, especially since pop culture right now is so much based on nerd stuff. Things that used to not be pop culture at all. Remember when Grease was pop culture? You weren't even alive then, probably. From all I hear about script leak rumors and all that kind of stuff that's going to be coming down in episode 9, it looks like Luke Skywalker is probably not dead, that J.J. Abrams is going to undo that. Them saying that he's gone. Well, I mean, like, he might have, physically been, joined the Force, but only to pop up somewhere else and reconstitute himself. That's why he had to leave his clothes behind. He's like a Force teleportation. No, it's not been seen before, but it would be something epically badass that, you'd expect what you wanted of Luke in terms of Luke being the greatest Jedi ever, which I'm not exactly sure where that was ever said. One could argue that the prophecy of Anakin bringing balance to the Force was rejected when he didn't take over for that old guy on the three-way Force psycho planet from the cartoon series Clone Wars. They had the Shadow guy and all that shit. Anakin was supposed to take over for him, and that was how he would be bringing balance to the Force, because he'd be like the fulcrum of keeping the two avatars of the dark side and the light side in check. But he didn't do that. And so at that point, Anakin failed the prophecy, and everything else is just Palpatine's manipulations and shit. I can't help but wonder that if we had a Wayback Machine, and in the early 1980s, just a couple of years into Reagan's administration, Reagan and other like minor celebrities suddenly now forced to be everyone's president, and there's a lot of people who were very against that and thought he was the devil incarnate, as I recall. Hated him quite thoroughly. They didn't have as much media control back then. But imagine they did, and imagine that we had Twitter and Facebook and YouTube back then, and how the reaction to Empire Strikes Back would have been perceived. No one knew that it was intended yet that Luke and Leia were going to be brother and sister, so like fresh out of that movie, first seeing it, like Han just totally stole Luke's girlfriend, and Luke gets his hand chopped off and is defeated, and Han's frozen in carbonite. It's like it was a real downer ending, and you have no idea how long it's going to take for the next one to get made and all that kind of shit. What kind of uproar would there have been on that fictional early 1980s social media internet if we had one back then? Would it have been as bad as today? Who knows? I just still can't help but feel that there's something fishy about the whole thing. Especially considering that there's so many of the YouTube channels are profiting and finding ways to make money off furthering and continuing the agitation. It's stalling everyone from absorbing the story for the next episode. It's stalling people from accepting and moving on from what just happened and be able to be open to what's coming next. And if it does turn out that Luke's not dead and is doing badass shit in episode 9 the way people wanted, then what that would also do is just give Luke an arc then from episode 8 to episode 9 of him first being found in a very low down spot in his life, and then getting his wind back up, getting back out there, and doing what he was destined to do. And that's a perfectly acceptable plot arc for someone. You won't know if you're on the like, fuck Disney, I ain't even gonna see it. We're gonna punish them. We're gonna punish them for hurting our precious Luke Skywalker. He was never yours. He's not even fucking real. They can do whatever the fuck they want with him. I mean, shit, there's crap they did with him in the books that was kind of pathetic and lame for a while, until they finally hooked him up with Mara. That was an on-again, off-again, will-they, won't-they thing for a long time, and they kept like having Luke fall in love with women who die or get turned into starships and all sorts of stupid shit. You've got to learn to move past these things, or become conscious of the fact that there's a bunch of very cynical stuff going on YouTube in particular, where people have learned to monetize this. And because they've monetized this, they have to keep it going. They're incentivized to be negative and make things out to be worse than they necessarily are. And is that really going to be ever good for the fandom? How can you still be a fandom in the aftermath of that becoming popular? I'm a fan of this saying, I hate everything about it. That it might not be what you intend, might not be what you think you're doing when you make these videos, but over time, that becomes the general impression.